Welcome to another action-packed session of the history of magic, witchcraft, and occultism. So today we're going to be talking about magic, and with a K, or ceremonial magic, magic that is different than stage magic, but is actually defined by Aliester Crowley and by all the people that come after him as the art and science of changing the world and the self according to one's will by the application of force. That's just to get us started. So first off the bat, I'm already talking about a guy named Aliester Crowley. Maybe you've heard of him. There's the Ozzy Osbourne song, Mr. Crowley, did you speak to the dead? Which is just a ridiculous song, whatever. But there is a whole bunch of pop culture references to this character. I mean, Aliester Crowley is actually on the cover of the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. He's on the cover in distance there. He was known as the most wicked man in the world in his life, which he quite enjoyed, and kind of got hoisted by his own petard because he leaned so much into people calling him the most wicked man in the world that people kind of took him seriously. Anyway, so Aliester Crowley is an English occultist. He lived from 1875 to 1947. Now, he was born into a family of fundamentalist Christians of the Brethren persuasion. Incidentally, my family was also Brethren before we became Calvinists, because that's how we roll. And he was from a family of brewers. He had a brewery. They were from, there's like a Crowley brewery that was a big deal for quite some time. He was always precocious and interested in religion. And also, being from a wealthy family, he had a good deal of inheritance that he frittered away, just dinking around a lot of his life. He was known for, if he would paint, he would buy the most expensive paints, the most expensive canvases. I don't think his paintings are very good. And when he would write, he would buy the most expensive paper and ink to do his poetry. I don't think his poetry is very good. And when he would publish his work, it would be on the most like expensive papers and like limited numbered editions of whatnot. But a lot of what he wrote when he's writing about religion is excellent. I will just sort of say that. He's a shitty poet with grand aspirations. He was also a grand mountaineer. He actually set some world records for mountaineering. I would argue he was the most interesting and probably the greatest syncretistic thinker about religion and mysticism that I've ever read, especially in the 20th century. He has a way of bringing together religious ideas that are mystic and legendary and mythological in just an astounding manner. And one thing that I like about Crowley is he's able to take from so many different religions and not dismiss those religions. He doesn't bubble it all down and just say, oh, that's all nonsense. Here's the truth. He kind of, I think, respects. He doesn't completely culturally appropriate. He borrows from places, but he keeps things distinct and he doesn't reduce. And I like that about him. Now, I just argued he was the greatest syncretic thinker, syncretic meaning putting things together, about religion and mysticism that I've ever read. He was also a buffoon. He enjoyed baiting the press. He enjoyed embracing his title as the wickedest man in the world. Now, the cool thing about his work, despite, I mean, the reality is he's kind of an ass. And he admitted that he was an ass. It's sort of an interesting argument. Maybe that person that's just seems to be just baiting you all the time might have something interesting to say. Crowley kind of did. But on the other hand, he even said that when he really realized what he needed to do in his life, his own great work, his own true will, he realized that he'd just been fucking around for like the past 40 years when he was 40 years old and realized it. Excuse my language. Anyway, so he would connect everything from Kabbalah, which is the mystic form of Judaism, to Egyptian religions and deities, to Indic Hindu lore, to Hinayana or Theravada Buddhism. And like I've argued, he created a very potent tarot deck called the Book of Thoth. Now, Crowley was an initiate in the Golden Dawn. So he knew Mathers. He knew all these Golden Dawn people, and they kicked him out. There's a story about supposedly Mathers kicked him down the stairs and they got into a fist fight. I don't buy any of it. I think they're like, you should go. And he's like, all right, I'll leave. So he left and he went on to start his own order. Now, he started his own sort of mystic magical group. And in time, he actually met another occultist whose name of Theodore Royce. Now, Royce was a German guy, and he had an order called the OTO, the Ordo Templar Orientis, or Ordo Templi Orientis, the Order of the Eastern Temple. Now, Roos read Crowley's book that's titled The Book of Lies. In the Book of Lies, he said that Crowley, in some of his elliptical type of writing, actually revealed the greatest secret of his order, the OTO, which is a sexual initiation secret. So Royce comes up to him and says, "So, you know the great secret?" And he's like, "I do." And he pulls out the book. He's like, "Yeah, that's right here." And he goes, "Okay, I do." And in time, Crowley became the head of the OTO. Royce initiated him to the highest level, and then Crowley went on to found temples and orders all over the world associated with this new type of thinking. Crowley wrote and painted and wined and dined and drugged all over the world. He was famously known for being a drug addict, and he wrote a really interesting book called Diary of a Drug Fiend. However, Crowley wasn't as much a drug addict as he was a lifelong asthmatic, and he would take heroin, which was once prescribed as a treatment for asthma, for a lot of his life. So he would take low doses of clinical heroin, not unlike Freud used to take an awful lot of cocaine, and that was how he was able to control his asthmatic symptoms. I mean, there's also rumors that say that he had calculated his ability to dose heroin so he could take enough heroin to kill a horse or an elephant or whatever. But like so many Crowley stories, the fantasy and the rumor is a lot higher than anything that probably actually happened. So there are a number of documentaries that you can find available. I would say that the best biography is by Richard Kaczynski, right here. That's the biography. The thing is, Crowley was a famous man. He may have been a spy. He may have inspired the "Up Yours, V for Victory" line that Churchill used against the Nazis. He hated Nazis. Crowley was an interesting guy. And for his time, I would argue he's kind of a sexist. He was very much pro-gender fluidity, pro-homosexuality. He himself was bisexual. And he was very forward-thinking. I'd say he's only as sexist as any other guy at the time. And I will note that the OTO, not unlike the Golden Dawn, did bring in female members. It was very much an offshoot of Freemasonry. Look to the left. And then you see the OTO lamen, the symbol. Remember, we talked about lamens, or those thin silvery plates from the curse tablets, and the rosy cross of the Golden Dawn. All of this comes together to what Crowley does. So Crowley, in the book Perdurabo, we can read that Richard Kaczynski wrote, and we had some interviews with him for today. That book really describes his whole life and tells the story of from 1875 to 1950, which is a big period in human culture. So Crowley had a magical motto, a magical name that was Perdurabo. Perdurabo was his magical motto, and that meant I shall persist until the end, which is a pretty bold statement to make and to take as a name. All right, the OTO does persist. There are bodies in most major cities. So the OTO, or the Ordo Templi Orientis, the Order of the Eastern Temple, provides the ritual initiations, the dramatic performances of initiation by which folks enhance through the order from stage 0, or Minerval, which is an honored guest, to stage 1, where you're a man and brother, and then all the way up, possibly, nobody gets beyond 4th or 5th, to the highest levels. Now, the OTO also houses a group called the EGC, the Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica, which sets forth the sacraments. They show the Gnostic Mass, which you can see here, where there's a priest worshiping the goddess as a woman, and that priestess and the priest come together. They bless a goblet of wine and a thing called a cake and blight, which is like a communion wafer. You consume those during the ritual, turn around, put your hands over yourself like that, and say, "There's no part of me that is not of the gods." And that's how you communicate. Take communion, you communicate. So the EGC does the Mass. It also does weddings, funerals, baptisms, and professions of faith. One prominent scholar that I quite like has said that once you start really looking at Crowley and reading in the 20th century of mysticism and religion, you can't get away from this guy. All right, y'all take a break and we'll be right back.